Students around the world are finishing their qualifications so they can get ahead in life and make their contribution. If you are studying, researching, or thinking about it, you will need practical tips, techniques, coaching, and support to help you get finished and be successful. I'm Peter Alkemer, the Student Success Coach, and welcome to the podcast. Each episode, I interview successful students and leaders in education so that you will learn everything you need right here. You will learn about writing, completing your thesis and other projects, planning, discipline, how to get more done, supervisors, getting published, getting finished, how to have the right discipline, and many other aspects of student life. Whether you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, Google, or any other podcast platform, please leave a rating and a review. Or if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. Either way, please get in touch and let us know what you think of the show and what you want to hear more of. Please always check the show notes for links to courses, material, and plenty more so that you can use what you've learned in each episode, take action, and achieve your student success. Please also join the Student Success Coach community in our exclusive members-only Facebook group where I post regularly and you can interact with fellow students just like yourself. Remember, you can't do this alone, so reach out, get involved, and take advantage. It's my commitment to your success. Now for this week's episode. Chris, welcome to the show. It's absolutely great to have you on board. And, the last time we caught up, I know that you were busy with some part-time studies. So we've got listeners today that are just very keen to get tips and tricks, about how to handle part-time studies, what that world looks like. And I'm keen to get your experience. And if you can provide some advice, to our listeners, it'll be great. And we've got people watching on YouTube as well. But before we get there, maybe just some background for everybody. If you can just bring us up to speed with what's your student and academic journey, and how have you progressed along the way since we last caught up?
So I started many years ago with a diploma in information technology, and that stood me in good stead to go down the whole IT route, writing software, building software products, etc. But I've always wanted to get into management. I've always been fascinated by strategy. About 3 years ago, I decided to go down the route of doing an MBA. I couldn't go straight from IT dip into MBA. I first had to do a postgrad in management. So NQF level 8, and then I was allowed to do my MBA, which was NQF level 9. Yeah, and I think the timing of when I started doing the MBA was just right for me. Like I said, I've always wanted to do an MBA, but I've been in what I call the gilded cage. So you are so enjoying what you're doing and loving what you're doing and progressing where you are that, there's never really the time to actually go into to do what you want to do because, you're busy with the stuff that you're being successful with. Right. I think for me, it was easier when my kids were older. So my eldest is actually studying first year varsity, and I seem to have lost you. Are you still there? Hello?
Yep. You got me.
Okay. So my eldest is doing second year varsity. Well, it was doing first year varsity when I was doing my. All my other two kids are in high school. They didn't take as much time from me as when I was younger, and when they were younger, more importantly. And also it was helpful to set an example to them of how to study and how to focus. An MBA is an enormous amount of work. So it was basically all day all day Sunday, with a break to get to church, and then, getting up at 4 o'clock every morning. So yeah, in essence, so 10 hours during the week, and another 10, 15 hours on the weekend.
Wow. And Chris, I mean, you obviously also had a full-time job, and that was obviously fairly demanding. I mean, just talk us through what that balance looked like for you. And obviously, as you say, your kids were a little bit further on and maybe a bit more self-sufficient. And, I've spoken to lots of postgrad students who have studied part-time. One lady was rocking her 6-month-old baby in one arm and typing with the other arm. And so when I said and now that was in her master's, and now she was doing a PhD, I said, okay, well, I presume now, maybe your child is a bit older and so on, and, you've got a bit more time. And no, she said she's had twins, so they're 6 months old as well now. But she had managed to get people to help her and put some boundaries in place. But what did that look for you? And I mean, I think it's so important, Chris, your point around the number of hours that you put in, or that is expected of that level of degree, because that people don't go into these levels of qualifications with a clear understanding of the quantity of hours that need to be put in, and how are you going to juggle those around the other time and hours that you're spending on other things. So what did that look like for you? Did you have to make sacrifices, or did you have that time available that you could put in?
I had the most amazing support from my family. Yeah, I think that they definitely sacrificed a lot. Yeah, the support I got from my wife was so amazing that, if I kind of, slowed down in my studies, she would be like, hey, aren't you supposed to be studying? So it's very self-sacrificial from that perspective. And also, I think the main thing is to in order to be able to study, you need to understand what works for you. So some people are evening people. So some people can work a full day, and then they can then click over to studies in the evening. Some people work really well on the weekends, etc., etc. I found that I'm a morning person, and I found that if I got out of bed, got a cup of coffee, and started working, that worked best for me. At least I started the momentum going. But yeah, if I kind of got a cup of coffee, watched some TV, then that was it over, or got distracted. So for me personally, I'm a morning person, so I've got to get my quality brain power stuff done first thing in the morning, and that's what worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody. Yeah, like I said, in the MBA. In our syndicate, there were guys who worked completely differently. They'd work in the evenings, late at night in the evenings. But so for me, by 4 or 5 o'clock, I was not any use to man or beast. So my evenings were there for me to kind of recalibrate, chill, slow down, etc. So you can put an amazing amount of effort and at the same time be able to relax as well. It's quite an interesting balance. So yeah, in the evenings I would spend time with my kids, etc., etc., and also on the weekends, doing 10 hours or whatever. We could still go out Saturday evening, or like I said, I did go to church on Sunday. Yeah, but okay. Again, even with the church, if I hadn't studied before I went to church, then I wouldn't have the momentum to carry on afterwards. So that's just how I work, but like, I'm not prescribing that for everyone. It's what I am saying is find what works for you, experiment with different times, and try and monitor your own energy levels and understand how to manage yourself, if that makes sense.
Know thyself.
Yep, 100%.
Brilliant. Okay, Chris, I mean, I think that's landed very well and is very good advice for everyone listening. So really just look deep within, your own world and how that works. And now that you want to add in, whether it's 20, 30, 40 additional hours towards another qualification in your spare time, make sure that you can do that, and how you would then do that in a way that suits your current patterns, I suppose. Chris, maybe, let's just have a look then. And I remember from just very fascinating conversations that we had about, going into the research that you wanted to do. And maybe just sketch out for us then the MBA. There's obviously a bit of a coursework and some modules that you went through up front, and then you went into some research. So just give us a little bit of insights as to that process that you went through with the MBA. And then obviously there's the different types of work. There was the content that you had to consume and retain, I guess, and then there was the research or the contribution to knowledge, which was where we interacted, and when you then did that study, and just keen to understand how the overall MBA worked and how you experienced it.
Okay, so yeah, first year essentially we did the foundations. So we studied finance, we studied people or HR, and we studied systems thinking, and that was pretty much just understanding the basics. At the end of that, there was 3 1-hour exams back to back that we went in and we sat down for. That was before COVID, obviously. Yeah, so first year was exams, second year was assignments. So second year were things like project management, things like marketing, strategy, that kind of stuff, and that was based on real world examples. So it's about how do you take the information and how do you apply it. So you couldn't just read something out of a book and then regurgitate something. You had to actually go, well, this is how you apply that. So yeah, you obviously had to create a foundation of academic understanding, and then show how you applied that to the situation that you had. So you'd have to literally come up with, so for project management, you'd literally have to come up with a project plan, with a project structure. If there was a need to reorganize the organization, then you would show how that would work, etc., etc. So very, very practical. And then your third year was the dissertation. So the dissertation was on our X journey, and yeah, I've always been very fascinated with change management. So as an IT guy, I can get a computer to do what I want it to do, but to get people to do what you want to do is a whole different kettle of fish. And how do you motivate them? How do you get them to that, to understand that this is necessary? I mean, people don't move unless they feel it's necessary. And yeah, just to look at what F&B and FirstRand is doing in order to create a single platform for everyone to work on, and how you actually get people on board to get there, which was really, really fascinating. And the dissertation followed the same sort of idea of what we did in the assignments, but just on a much bigger scale. So it's a case of what does academia say about change management? What do they say about platform thinking as far as digitization of the business goes? All of that kind of stuff. So you lay that foundation, and then you say, right, these are the things to look for. This is how a successful or not successful look from an academic perspective. Then I interviewed 16 senior HR and senior execs, just to get their perspective on how the business was going through this journey and where they were at in the journey. And then ultimately you take the academia, you filter it through the experiences, and you come up with recommendations. It sounds very simple, but it's not that simple. And I must say I learned a huge amount about FirstRand, about the X journey that we're on, and about change management. And I'm very grateful that I did it, although it was a lot of work.
Okay, fantastic, Chris. I mean, just there's so many aspects of that are so interesting. I guess maybe let's just touch on your methodology. So you talked about interviews, and then I would presume there was some sort of process by which you sort of, aggregated all of that information and then developed some sort of theoretical framework or findings or results, which then ultimately you linked back to your original thesis statement. I mean, maybe just talk us through that process of so you talked about the interviewing, which was great. And then did you transcribe those interviews? Did you then code those line by line? Just talk us through the practicalities. I think it's such a common aspect that people get stuck with. You know, they can sort of see themselves going in and doing interviews, and all of a sudden they've got all these transcripts. And now how do they cross the bridge from getting from that raw qualitative data to something that links back to their thesis statement and contributes in the field that they're studying?
Yeah, so yes, I did transcribe. So first of all, audio recordings of every interview. I think that's really, really important. Well, obviously for note-taking things, but it's also I think there's a certain strategy, there's a certain skill set that is important when you're interviewing someone. So you want them to be able to answer your questions as freely as they can. So it's very important to engage them in eye contact and to ask open-ended leading questions. Well, so my research was qualitative rather than quantitative. So that's why interview was my research methodology. And in that, with that strategy, you have to, you want to get as much rich data from experts as possible. And for that reason, I used open leading questions. And that's not possible if you kind of, in my opinion, it's not possible to engage while you're writing notes. So I actually found it a lot easier to just rely on the recording. The transcribing of the recording itself was a lot of effort as well. So taking notes, taking audio recordings and transcribing them is quite difficult, time consuming, not difficult. What I did do though was I used AWS as an engine. They've got a voice to text thing, and I would say I'd saved at least 50% of time just in the transcribe itself. So yeah, there's a lot of different voice to text engines out there, but unfortunately, I mean, they can't handle every single different dialect in South Africa or every single nuance of our language, and they're typically American. So yeah, there is still a lot of work after that to actually then play back the recording and just fix all the errors. But I would definitely recommend a voice-to-text engine. That will help a lot. And then from then onwards, basically, yeah, just took each transcript and then started pulling out common themes from that, you know. So I would read, I would say, okay, what I'm looking for is, so there were some high-level research questions that I had, and every single interview had the same research, the same high-level questions. So I would then say, okay, what did this person say on that question? What did this person say on that question? What did this? And then start saying, okay, well, 3 people said that, but 2 people said the opposite, and start massaging the data from that perspective. So that's the methodology I used. So we were taught to actually then go one step further and actually codify each word. I didn't feel it necessary to do that. I think because I had asked the same questions in the same order to each of the audience, it was quite, from my data, it was quite easy to find the correlation between what everyone was saying.
Okay. Okay, got it. No, that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, Chris, that AWS engine, where do people go and find that?
I'll have to go and find it myself. So because I'm a developer, I actually used low-level API calls. I wrote my own software to actually call AWS. So yeah, if you're not a software developer, I don't know how easy it would be to use it.
So this is some of the benefits from your time in the gilded cage, I suppose.
Yes, no, absolutely. I know, I still am very, very passionate about IT. I love IT big time.
It's amazing how, you know, I think, you know, when you talk about just, you know, blending experiences from being in different roles, and it is incredible how there's so much crossover and reuse of skills from one area to another. So I mean, that's just a classic example of that. And then Chris, okay, so then now you had all this data, you abstracted all these themes, and you did a little bit of coding. You had sufficient sort of thematic understanding of what people were saying, which, because you had consistent questionnaires, you were able to compare across the different interviews, etc. And then so just take us through the process of writing up, and you know, your discipline around writing, and how big that final document or dissertation looked like, and what was that process like for you? Was it enjoyable? How did you get through it? How did you balance the writing process? Did you get it in on time? Were there a lot of corrections? Just break that whole process down for us, please.
Yeah, so my dissertation was, well, I can't remember the exact word count, but we were aiming for 18,000 words. So I got there or thereabouts. Yeah, I think the dissertation itself is very structured. So you start with an introduction. Well, actually, you start with an executive summary, which is basically, you know, you write your executive summary last, because ultimately it's your one pager. It's that one page that everyone reads to decide whether they're going to read the rest of the dissertation. And then, yeah, your introduction. So that's just basically introducing first strand, the whole concept around, you know, what is a platform thinking, from an academic perspective, what is digitization, etc., etc., etc. And then to explain the challenge from a change management perspective. Yeah, then chapter 2 is, chapter 2 was pretty much about, you know, what does academia say? This is what they say about all of these different things. These are the research topics. This is how far we've got, etc., etc. So that was a literature review. And then the chapter 3 was about, okay, so what are we trying to solve for? So a good way to write any academic stuff that we've learned is an hourglass. So what you want to do is you want to go from lots and lots of information and summarize it and summarize it and summarize it until you get down to 2 or 3 questions. And then you answer those questions. So it's very succinct. It's like, what are we solving for? And this is the solution. And then from that, you start expanding and substantiating why you say what you say. So yeah, chapter 3 was the question, the questions. Chapter 4 was the answers, and then then you went into, okay, so this is what the interview was. So explain what all an aggregation of what all the interviews were, and then this was the original academic question, and these are the answers. So you kind of then look at the interview through the lens of the academics that you've done. And then you give answers based on academia, not your own opinion, which is obviously what you're trying to do.
Absolutely, you are going to make that contribution through that academic lens. And then I guess, you know, you're going to round it off with a conclusion that really assesses the contribution or the value, maybe, you know, sets out some of the limitations that you experienced, and then, you know, possibly the sort of future work, etc. Did you go back to any of your interviewees just to give them a view of, you know, what were your provisional results? And, you know, if they were to sit down and look at that report and think, well, you know, how did they sort of calibrate, you know, how did you calibrate your findings against maybe a couple of the individual interviewers or other people that would have had some insights around your study?
To be honest, the feedback from my original interviewees, I have given them feedback. I have shared my dissertation. I guess I haven't then gone and drilled down and sat with them and said, what exactly do you like, what you don't like? The feedback has been positive, but it wasn't an in-depth critique. There wasn't like the general feedback was great, but yeah, there wasn't more feedback than that.
No, good. I mean, I use grounded theory for my PhD, and I did 25 interviews, and they talk about selective sampling. So you go back to maybe one or two, and then you run them through the sort of final results, and then that sort of calibrates some of the data. And I guess it's a more extensive methodology possibly for a larger scale research project. And I mean, it sounds like you did a sufficient amount of calibration for your study, which is great news. Okay, Chris, I mean, that's really good news. And then, I mean, what was the process from there? You submitted, did you have changes to make from the examiners, or, was it sufficient and then you passed and that was it?
Yeah, no, the process, so every chapter that I wrote, I had a supervisor. So every chapter that I wrote, I would share with the supervisor, and that in itself would start an iterative process. And I think, your supervisor has got all the academic background. So, they are definitely going to pick your work to pieces. And I think to understand, I mean, the first couple of times I was quite, I had to take a couple of deep breaths, because I was like quite offended at how they'd taken my stuff to pieces. But I must say, just trust in that process. I think that's something that Henley kept on saying to us, is that your supervisor is an expert in your field, and they know your field, they understand the research methodology, etc. So go with it. So a lot of times I was like, where are we going with this thing? But I mean, it all made sense in the end. So yeah, my supervisor would critique chapter 1. There would be back and forth until he was okay with me to go into the next chapter. So yeah, over a period of months, we went through that process. And every chapter was reviewed.
Okay.
And then at the end, once he's happy with all of that, then it went for editing, and that's where they check your well, I mean, they don't check your spelling. You should be way beyond that. I mean, they're checking for flow and grammar, and that it reads nicely and stuff like that. So there were quite a few changes from the editor as well, before the final submission.
And Chris, just talking, I mean, you talked about flow, and one of the things I teach in my courses about constructing, a high quality dissertation so that you'll pass your sort of postgraduate level qualification, is that, even though you've got these almost building blocks of the different sections, you do need to make sure that you stitch them together so that the reader goes on a journey throughout your work. And also that even if they dive into any individual section, there's almost enough that you catch them up on for context, that although they need to go back to a previous section for more detail, they can still pick it up from that without feeling disorientated. I mean, did you do that? Did you stitch your sections together and create that flow between them just for the final product?
Yeah. Look, I mean, the editing was more of a flow between paragraphs, and editing from a professional editor perspective. But absolutely, I mean, the flow through your entire dissertation is absolutely critical. The last thing you want is a reader to get lost somewhere along the line, because then, it breaks that flow. So, yeah, I mean, you definitely need a golden thread throughout. There's a central theme from beginning to end. Every single chapter starts with, even the introduction chapter starts with an introduction, a body, and then a conclusion, and you kind of exactly start the next chapter with an introduction, and that introduction is kind of a summary of what's happened before. It seems like a lot of repetition and a lot of going over the same thing, but when you are reading something that is academic and a large amount of information to kind of consume, it is really, really helpful to have those summary points throughout your dissertation.
Yeah. And Chris, I mean, you've talked about this idea of a golden thread, and I mean, I also teach my students quite a lot about the need to signpost, people through your work. So just like you go on a hike, there'll be some signposts along the way to keep you going. And we also must realize that we've been immersed in our study. we're so familiar with it, it feels like repetition to us. But to somebody that is kind of reading it possibly for the first time, obviously your supervisor knows it well, etc. But when somebody picks it up and wants to get some value from it, they're completely cold, so that what might feel like repetition to us is actually just very helpful signposting to them in terms of the golden thread. Okay, Chris, I mean, just stepping back now, what did you learn along the way that you wish you knew beforehand and you were like, why didn't anybody tell me? So somebody listening today, thinking about doing an MBA or thinking about doing a postgraduate study, or about to kick off a large-scale research project like the one that you've been doing, what are those golden nuggets, insights that you picked up that you just wish you had known, and that you wish you'd listened to a podcast like this and said, wow, that's great advice, I'm going to take that into account and it'll save me hours of time or lots and lots of frustration?
I think the major difference with an MBA versus all of my study beforehand is when you get to MBA level, you are more in charge of what you're studying than previously. So previously it's like, these are the subjects that you're going to study. Chapter 1 is this, chapter 2 is this, chapter 3 is that, and you're studying along with everybody else. When you start specializing, you're kind of going, well, I'm actually going to research this topic, and peers are going to review what I'm saying, rather than a teacher teaching you how to do something. So I wish that when I started, I had chosen my topic for my dissertation back then, because as I studied, I could actually do first year, second year, and third year through the lens of my dissertation. Instead of doing first year, second year, get to the dissertation, panic, what's my topic going to be, and then I lost a lot of ground with that. So I would say from day one, look for your dissertation topic. Look for the subject that you are interested in. Look at the organization that you're in, and figure out for yourself what it is that you want to push the boundaries on in first year. Don't wait until third year before you make that decision.
Chris, I mean, that is just brilliant advice, and I heard it from somebody as well this week. And I'm actually interviewing one of the lecturers from the Gibbs Business School next week, and I'm going to ask him whether there is a formal, opportunity or process by which, business schools possibly could do a little bit more to help students formulate their topic or thinking around their research study right up at the beginning, before they even get into a lot of the content. Because as you say, when you're looking at that content through the eyes of a topic that you're interested in, and if you potentially developed a good thesis statement, then when you get to the research activity and work that you need to do, you're not going to spin wheels and waste time on developing a topic. You may refine it, but you've got a lot of thinking time that you put into that before you actually then have to do the work. So, I mean, I think that is just, and even if it's not part of the process with your institution, just very good practice to get your topic sorted out as soon as possible. And I think the other side of that coin is that students tend to think that they have to refine a perfect topic to have a better study. And often the topic just has to be good enough. And if you think about the cul-de-sacs that you went through, spending too much extra time on refining a topic early on doesn't always translate into a better outcome further down the track. Obviously, it's got to be something you're interested in and that you can make a contribution with. But I do find that people spin wheels, and then that costs you time where you can get better value later on when you're actually producing the report and writing it and chasing that deadline. And those extra couple of weeks that you potentially wasted earlier on, you would love to have those extra weeks back just to get a better product that you can submit. Chris, thank you. That is absolutely brilliant. So going forward now for you, I mean, so, your career progression from sort of a more technical beginnings through the different levels of qualifications, and now with a lot more of a business and change management aspect as part of it, but with the benefit of your technical experience helping you with these tools like Amazon voice to text engines and many others that I'm sure students would love to have your knowledge and insights to help save them some time. So maybe we'll do another whole show on technical tips and tricks for postgraduate students, and you can give us your insights. But what's next for you? I mean, are you sufficiently now immersed in a business type of career and role, and is there more studies on the horizon for you? Or maybe the next phase in your life is just to give the studies a break and see the application and the contribution come through what you've already done.
So the MBA is an itch I wanted to scratch from the beginning, and that is ticked. So yeah, I'm done. I'm hanging up my academic suit, and that's it. I'm done. As far as you know, so literally on the day that I kind of told my boss that I'd passed my MBA, I got a promotion. So from software dev to application dev manager. So I've jumped 2 rungs. So normally you'd go from software dev to team lead, but I've got to app dev manager.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you very much. But yeah, that's kind of, so I've moved now from I'm still very, very interested in strategy. So yeah, this is definitely just, you know, the next step in my career. So I'm definitely aiming for Exco. That's where I would like to be. I love strategy. I love, you know, vision and values, and I like the why. Why do we do stuff? Not, you know, the operational kind of this is how we're going to do it, but why are we doing it? Are we doing the right stuff? You know. So yeah, and then I've always had an entrepreneurial itch. That's something that I have always wanted to do, and I feel that the MBA has definitely equipped me to be able to be a jack of all trades, which is something you do need to do as an entrepreneur. So yeah, that's something that I am looking to do in the future for sure.
Great, Chris. And last question, I mean, just you know, these podcasts that we do and the content that, you know, I work hard to, you know, offer to my students and the coaching, etc. I mean, and you know, we had a couple of sessions, you know, and you sort of found your feet, and, you know, I sort of pointed you in a direction of a few people to interview, etc. I mean, what role does coaching and that sort of level of support play, and how important do you think it is for students to sort of actively seek out, maybe not directly linked to their institution, but someone that can just be on the journey with them when they need them, a phone call away, etc. I mean, was that something valuable for you? And I presume you had other people helping you along the way, etc. And how should students go about getting that type of help, do you think?
So this is a bit embarrassing because I'm talking to you, who you helped me. But your help was invaluable, absolutely invaluable. So my situation was quite unique in that I had just been retrenched from MultiChoice. So I knew, I mean, I was a new dev well, an old dev, but in a new organization. And I knew nobody. So, I mean, your help was absolutely instrumental. I had no idea who to talk to. And because you have, you yourself are studying, you were sympathetic to my plight to find interviewees, and that's always a challenge. So, yeah, having a sponsor in the organization, I think, I would say without that, it's almost impossible, I would say. So just to have someone who can, you know, open doors and you know, and also give perspective of, you know, where in the organization you would get the best data from. I think, yeah, I got value from every single interviewee, you know, and that was because you had said, look, these are the best guys to talk to. They kind of know how this change management stuff is happening. They're the engine room for this exchange stuff. And you came with a perspective of using HR rather than managers, which was brilliant because they understand that lingo better. So absolutely, having a coach, having a sponsor is I think will make or break your dissertation for sure.
No, that's great, Chris. And it wasn't a loaded question. It was an absolute pleasure to help you. And I help anybody that asks me, and I put my time and effort into helping students be successful. That's what I feel as a student success coach I ultimately want to see. And for you to have achieved your qualification and then got a promotion on the same day, and to have your sights set on, the career ladder, and I think the encouragement and the motivation you've got and the insights, that you've been able to draw on now in your career and in your roles going forward is just such a wonderful example of student success. So I'm smiling. If you can't see that on the podcast, if people are listening today, Chris is also smiling. I'm smiling, and this is exactly the example of student success that we aim for and that we try and help people achieve with, whether it's coaching and content or courses. And there are many other people like myself. So go and get that help that you need. Find somebody that will support you along the way so that you can achieve that goal. And all the sacrifice that you make along the way becomes worth it at the end. And I think what we've heard from Chris today about his journey and his insights around some of the intricacies of doing the research and coding the interviews and then developing the final results, in his paper, and how he submitted that and how he worked with his supervisors and his colleagues to get through that MBA has been, I think, just so important for people to get that insights, hopefully before they go into it, and can then make the right decision. But if you're in the middle of it and you have, been struggling to get through it, maybe today has given you some values of support and ideas to make progress. Chris, any last thoughts, and then we'll let you go. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, just as I think the last thoughts are that, I mean, your studies are not just a piece of paper. I think if you approach it as, I want to learn more so that I can apply it in my business and my life, then that makes all the difference, So yes, I got the piece of paper with the MBA, but there is so much value in what I learned, and I can apply that learning every single day. And I think that's the difference between success or failure, is taking what you've learned and applying it. And while you're learning, think of how you can apply it, and learn it not just to get a tick in a box, but learn it in order to enrich your life.
Brilliant. Chris, well done. Congratulations on the MBA. Look forward to seeing your ongoing success in the workplace as you set your sights on those goals, which I've got no doubt you're going to achieve, and just continue to make a wonderful contribution to your team and the organization and the people around you. Thanks, Chris.
No worries. Awesome. Absolute pleasure.